I've been in California for 25 years now, but I grew up in the Bible Belt. So, raised in, the heart of Appalachia, small rural community. Um, and so I grew up going to church. That's what you did on Sundays, almost to, you know, the person in my community. I mean, there was obviously exceptions, people who didn't go to church, but the reality was almost everybody I knew was not necessarily in my church, but they were in a church on a Sunday. So I grew up, that was normal for me. I didn't really necessarily know why I was there. I just knew that that's what you did on Sundays. So I had a belief in God from the time I was little. Um, I didn't become a Christian until I was 17, though. So transitioning through my childhood, my parents were divorced when I was 6. Had some rough family dynamics as a result of that, um, which led to being raised by a single mom who had to work 2 jobs sometimes. And so I had 2 older brothers who were 4 and 5 years older than I was, so that the stuff they were getting into that they weren't supposed to be getting into in high school, I was joining them in middle school. So that may be par for the course now, but back then, the stuff I was doing in middle school was not what your average middle schooler was doing. So at the age of 13, hardcore rebellion, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of stuff that just, I was trying to find something to kind of soothe some of the teenage angst that had built up in me. And, so I would just, go along with what everybody else was doing. And I definitely was, although I was still in church on a Sunday, I wasn't connected with God in any form or fashion. So it wasn't until I was 17 years old that a childhood, well, actually, my best friend came to me at the time and he said, "Hey, I can't party with you anymore. I've become a Christian." And for me, my definition of what a Christian was just somebody who went to church on Sunday. So I thought I was one. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm a Christian too. And he goes, no. I really have a relationship with God now. And I can't do all this, stuff. Can't do the drugs anymore. Can't do the drinking anymore. And that intrigued me a little bit. I was like, wow, what got a hold of him? What was making make this change in his life? He actually turned me on to another childhood friend of mine who had started a Christian rock band. And he said, they're looking for a lead singer. And I had grown up singing in church choir, children's choir. I grew up singing in high school, middle school, high school choir. It was something I really enjoyed. And he said, you should try out and become the lead singer. And honestly, for me, there was no spiritual, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? No spiritual side to it at all. I just, thought to myself, this will be a great way to pick up chicks, becoming the lead singer of a band. So I hadn't even dissected the whole idea that this was going to be a Christian band. So, I said, I tried out, they, in the audition, they liked what they heard apparently, and they made me the lead singer of the band. So as a non-believer, I started singing Christian music. I started actually even writing Christian music, but I wasn't a Christian yet. And, but that's how God he got me in, right? He suckered me into this idea of thinking, I was coming in for one reason and God totally had a different reason. So shortly thereafter, about 6 months in, I went to a Petra concert. They're a Christian rock band from the 70s and 80s. And they gave an altar call. And at the end of that, I really had this tug on my heart. And I felt like this is kind of what I came up with. I said, I either need to be all the way in or all the way out. I can't walk the fence anymore. I can't, have one foot in, one foot out, one foot in the world, one foot in the kingdom. So I answered the altar call. I prayed with a young gentleman that I knew from college who happened to be one of the prayer people up front. And I surrendered my life to God that night. So at 17, December of 1986. At that concert, I became a Christian, and that's what I've been doing ever since. I said I've got to be serious about it, and I've been serious ever since. So that's my story.
That's awesome. I have some questions.
Okay.
But I had Petra brought up. I remember. Do you remember the song Beyond Belief?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that song popped in my head from them. I was listening secretly to Christian songs back then. So tell me about that point in becoming a pastor and kind of bridge the gap from then to where you are now. Take as long as you need to
Sure.
or want to or
Sure. Um, so I did the band thing for a while. That's how I met my wife. That's probably a whole nother story, rabbit trail we'll get down at some point in time.
most
But
definitely.
yeah, and we ended up getting married. And actually, we were on our honeymoon in the Bahamas at a church that was pastored by an American. Had a guest Nigerian evangelist that morning. I even remember the sermon he preached. Um, and after the service, he called me up front, and I had long hair back then. We'll have to show some
Yeah,
pictures down the
definitely.
road. But he said he called me up front. He wanted to speak some things over me, and he said, "You're in music ministry, but God is changing the direction of your life. And when you go home, you will no longer be in music ministry. You're going to become a pastor and a teacher." Now that was not on my radar at all. I was, thinking I was going to be doing Christian rock for the rest of my life. That's what I had grown my hair out long enough to be able to do that for the rest of my life. And so I just kind of filed that and said, okay, great, thanks. Went home. On my answering machine is one of my band members who says, "While you were gone on your honeymoon, the band broke up. Broke up. Uh, so and so is moving here. So and so is moving there." And a month later, my now spiritual dad asked me to join his campus ministry, which I helped him start at the time, but I just had no idea that I was going to be a pastor and a preacher. But that started me down that road of now being in full time ministry for 35 plus years.
That's amazing. Yeah, I knew some of that. That some of the deal, and we almost definitely will be sharing pictures at some point. The long hair is awesome. It was totally 80s rock band esque. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And over the next weeks and months, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing these days with your ministry. Um, they're doing some amazing things in California, and I want the world to kind of see. And you're going to get to see some of that, or at least his perspective through his book and subsequent books too. He's working on other books as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. You didn't take nearly as long as I'm going to now, so maybe I'll get through this quickly. I don't know.